What's the significance of constitutional dynamism, and why does it result in institutional constitutional steps?
Right, I think there's a problem in taking dynamism, constitutional dynamism, as a manifestation of the working out of some kind of inner constitutional logic that gets elaborated and developed. Because I think these systems are dynamic, and they certainly exhibit constitutional dynamism, but it's not a function of some inherent inner constitutional logic. It's a function of the dynamics of the networks themselves. And I've made the point that the networks don't instrumentalize the constitutions. They don't sort of manipulate and operate the constitutions from some secret inner recess. They're not like the Wizard of Oz. They actually inhabit the constitutions. They wear the constitutions. They merge with the constitutions. They govern through the constitutions. So the constitutional dynamism you see is ultimately a function of network dynamics.
How did the Soviet tradition influence constitutions of the stands?
Well, I've made the point that Soviet constitutionalism deserves to be taken seriously, and it typically is not, that it was a radically innovative scheme for conciliar governance, that is, governance through councils, through state control of the means of production, state socialization, and through a very distinctive project of ethno-territorial federalism and multiculturalism. So it's a tough act to follow. What the Soviet system managed to combine, though, was, on the one hand, a kind of hyper-formalism. So the Soviets were massively invested in their own version of the rule of law, in socialist legality, in adopting masses of regulations. Everything in the Soviet Union was done in some due juridical form or other. And that coexisted somehow with pervasive, rampant informality. So that the Soviet Union functioned by figuring ways around the rules. And that sort of dualism of hyperformalism on the one hand and rampant informality on the other is precisely what characterizes all the Central Asian states. And it's why it makes it so difficult to do justice to Central Asian constitutionalism using conventional frameworks of analysis.
What are some of the solutions to the riddle of all Central Asian constitutions?
Well, I've just suggested a few, right? There's this, you know, they were all formed in the Soviet womb, the Soviet constitutional womb. So they have to be understood as constitutional artifacts, qua states and qua nations in the first place, which is really weird. I cannot think of another example of states and peoples which owe their very existence to somebody else's constitutional project. But that's characteristic of the Central Asian states. So constitutionalism itself has a kind of, you know, has a very profound structural significance in the Central Asian states, which it doesn't have even in the rest of post-Soviet space Eurasia.